to you all once again. Kavita Ramamurthy here. It's been a great journey with you all so far in Be InnoThinker as a curriculum strategist and a faculty member. And it's an absolute pleasure to meet you all, our old alumni and our new participants, the new normal November. Looking forward to stay connected with you all in the future too. Now, let's move on to the main event of the day for the expert talk on cybersecurity and data privacy. To give us insight on this topic, I welcome Mrs. Anita Rajesh, an accomplished senior management professional with 23 years plus experience in IT industry. She is alumna of College of Engineering. She is a certified information privacy professional by IAPP and a risk professional. Currently, she is a consultant on information security and data privacy. It's a great privilege to have her as one of our advisor of Be InnoThinker. Hearty welcome, Mrs. Anita. Once again, over to you. We really look forward to listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavita, for the introduction, and it's very what to say. You feel so bubbly and young with the kids around to kind of address them. Am I audible? First, let me just check it out.
Yeah, you are.
Okay. So thank you for the introduction, and to see the cheeriness among the children to kind of address them. I think it's really heartwarming to watch them. Anyway, what I will try to do is I'll try to encapsulate the information that I have so that they will be able to understand where I'm trying to come from a privacy angle and from an info security perspective. I think most of the parents would be kind of guiding the children in terms of what to access and how to access in the internet and how to kind of play it safe, because we as parents are supposed to kind of keep them at abeyance on certain quarters in certain areas. So I just wanted to pose a question across to maybe one would answer this. What do you know about the term privacy? What does it mean to you? You can unmute the phone and unmute the microphone and then give me the response. What does it mean to you? What does privacy mean to you?
Ma'am?
Yeah?
Privacy is like we need things that we do not.
Hema
displaying as Mugundan.
Almost there near the response, but let's see what other people have. What are the inputs they have?
Privacy is basically the right to be alone and a right to have information that's supposed to be with you without anyone else knowing.
Answer the question.
Hari Ganesh.
Hari Ganesh is back. So yes. So
to keep it like passwords.
So it's more of a right to be left alone. Right to be left alone with your information, or with your family, or with your freedom of information that you can share. So all that encompasses privacy. So basically, I think you people do have some idea about what you mean by privacy, right? In terms of what you have to keep away from people, right? Your pictures, your personal friends' information, or your family related information. So you have to guard all this information. I am telling you, this is especially all of you children are kind of exposed to social media at this age, right? So what amount of information you need to share across Facebook or in Snapchat or in Insta. So you need to be careful in what you kind of share across to people. What is it associated with? So whatever.
I know, ma'am.
Yeah.
Data privacy means like we have to keep some passwords. We have like some money in our bank account our parents have. We need to keep that thing from others. If others have it, they might do bad things about it. That is our data. We need to make sure sometimes no other people need to have it. We keep passwords. We keep some plans for business, something like that secret thing. If other people know it, it could completely break. Or we might go to, we might get beatings by the guy. Something like that might happen if other people get exposed to our data. So that is what data privacy means.
Okay, so basically you're right, but one part is you keeping the data safely. That is your bank account related info, what daddy and mommy keep in terms of their passwords, that they do not allow it to be available to other people. That is one. What about large institutions like hospitals, like banks, like corporations? So they handle data about us. Us meaning people who live in the country, who live in the state, who live in the city. So all that information that is concerning the personal information needs to be kept within a tight monitor and a enforced mechanism so that people do not lay, or as you say, it should not be, data should not be abused to, in the sense, utilized in a different perspective altogether, so that they can make money out of it. They can steal the data and sell it across. They can misuse a lot of things. So that is, they can defame a person's name. They can put unwanted pictures stating that so and so is this, but in reality it might not be you. So all that is data privacy. So it does not concern only the individual, but it concerns the bigger context, the organizations that are dealing with the data. So that is data privacy in totality. So what I would love, can we go, I think Prakash, can you just flip over to the first slide?
Yeah, we also have a bunch of our interviewers to ask you questions. They are waiting to ask you. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. I'll just, sure. So what I am trying to put in this slide is what is the kind of information that we are trying to share across, be it in the internet. So when you do a purchase or a shopping or what is the kind of information that gets collected about you? And that information, if it is not in the right hands, what are all the problematic areas? That is kind of depicted in this picture that I'm sharing. So initially what you see is you visit a website and they track the record in terms of what are the online activities that you perform. Then after the tracking happens, this information that whatever you're buying, say Amazon is trying to track what you're buying. So what will happen is they will keep a record of it. They will give it to the advertisers. You see a lot of advertisements in all websites, right? On the right hand side or the left hand side, they'll keep flashing. But today, if you're purchasing skating shoes, tomorrow they'll be suggesting what are all the helmet, gears and other things that you need to buy. So they will suggest this could be bought, that could be bought. So how do you think they're all making money? This is by advertisements, they all make money. So
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, I think my father sometimes uses Amazon and Google when I do. And in Google, I think they use that kind of thing. They always track what we're doing and try to make money by selling some things. Like when I do YouTube, they keep on doing like YouTube Premium, something like that. Or whenever I watch a video, they keep on showing like another ad subscribe to this channel. It is like that video. So Google does like that. They keep on trying to make money by advertising things that is like almost like the things that we see or use now.
Correct. What you're saying is that is in a related aspect. They are trying to sell things across to you, trying to prod you and make you buy stuff. But how do you think that it doesn't go only to Google? It doesn't go only to Amazon. They transfer it to other third-party advertisers who in turn share it with other publishers. So that is how the entire network, they make money out of the entire transaction. So that is how it happens. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So, where do you think this entire thing started about privacy? It all started, I think, when you come to your probably 8th standard or 9th standard, you might come to know that we had the Second World War happening, during which times people faced a lot of issues related to privacy of information, privacy. Basically, people having their individual privacy. So what happened was the United Nations, you must have heard about the United Nations. So they had come up with something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in way back in 1948, saying that every individual is entitled to right to family and private life and freedom of expression. So that forms the basis on which the European regulation and other laws are built. Actually, there are 139 privacy laws globally, and each country is now formulating their privacy laws. If you ask in India, we are trying to formulate the privacy law and data protection. It is called the Data Protection, PDPB, Personal Data Protection Bill. And this bill is being formulated right now. It is yet to be approved by the Parliament and yet to be brought into force into the country. So once that comes into play, then there will be a lot of restrictions in terms of the information that we share across. So what is personal data? Any information, say supposing I think Mukundan was talking about his name, any details about him in terms of how old he is, his date of birth, or all the associated information about that particular individual. And supposing Mukundan, anyone else could be owning a particular BMW car. So what color it is, all that relating to. So any object, anything, but that individual, it has to be a living person, not a person who is dead. That is what you mean by natural person. So it has to be any information about a living person that you collect, and it is a personal information, then it gets into the category of data. There are certain sensitive personal data also available. It could be like what ethnic origin, race, political.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Sure. Go ahead.
You were telling that, ma'am. You were telling that you can only it's illegal to steal privacy from a dead person. But when Einstein died, it's coming like somebody stole his brain.
No, I didn't get your question. Can you come again on that? You said, what was your question? Einstein died. His
brain was stolen to see what made him a genius. Somebody stole. It comes in a lot of videos, ma'am.
So what is your question? So what are you saying? That is
Isn't it illegal to do like that? Isn't it illegal to steal privacy from like a dead person?
No. The thing is, it is data pertaining to the individual. It is not the organ or the body or per se. It is the data pertaining to that person. If supposing that person is dead, then it is not considered as data of that person. So we can't do anything with that data if it is a dead person. So yeah.
Ma'am, like you're telling, if for example, if a person died and if maybe his finance details and all, he gave it to someone else, then that information is still data, right?
That is data, but we are not considering the data, financial data of a dead person as part of the personal data in terms of data privacy. Only for people who are alive. Only for people who are alive and living. So data privacy, did you understand where I am trying to kind of tell you, or you still have doubts on that?
Understood, ma'am.
Okay. So basically the data privacy is nothing but you collect all the data pertaining any organization. Say a hospital might be collecting data about you. You go, daddy or mommy go for a hospital to do a medical checkup. Okay, so they will collect data about the blood grouping, about the sex, about the gender, about what are the different tests that they have undergone. All that is information about the individual. The hospital will have that information. The hospital should ensure that that information is not leaked out in any form or outside. Supposing that individual who has undergone the test is a celebrity, say supposing if it is Shah Rukh Khan who has gone to the hospital, and supposing he has some ailment, they have discovered that in the hospital. Now, that information should not go to the media. That is data privacy. Fine? So that is how data privacy works. So the hospital has to take end-to-end responsibility right from the collection of information, processing of that information, and until his case history is completed in the hospital, that they have to take full ownership. So that is, and if there is any way that data is getting distributed across or it's shared across to the public, then the hospital can be sued. Or you can go and represent your case across and it will be sued. So that is where things are. 1 second, just a second.
Yeah. So this is what Anita ma'am is giving us for today. So this would be a nutshell of what data privacy is. So a very key points alone she has mentioned here. So we will read through this, and we also have some questions ready for her, right? So we will start asking the questions and we can get to hear from her more. She is an industry expert and she has wide knowledge. And still, if you guys have questions, please put your questions in the social media thread. You can connect with us in Facebook or in Insta, and you can continue your queries there. She will also be staying connected. We all have a mentoring team also, right? So any of us will be able to continue sharing the questions. For now, probably for the want of time, we all can stay on mute, and the interviewers, we will start asking the questions. We have a slide with the interview's photo as well, right? We have a slide with our interviewer's picture. So these are our interviewers, Pradyuman, Advait, Sahasran, Satkrit are our interviewers. They can ask the questions and we can get to hear more from our expert. Still, if any of you have other questions, you can continue asking us in the social media. We will unmute ourselves and we'll be ready to ask the questions. When Anita ma'am is back with us, we'll start asking our questions. I hope she's back with us. Yeah, Satkrit. Yes. Wait, let me double check if she's back with us. Hold on, Satkrit. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Yeah, so they just can't wait to hear from you, okay? They are super excited to ask you the questions. There you go, Satkrit.
Okay, I can't see Anita, ma'am.
You want to see her in the camera, is it? You're looking for her in the camera, is it? Okay, I can see her in the picture and I'm happy with that. Anita ma'am, he's looking for you.
I can't hear that.
Here you go. Here you go.
Okay. So, my name is Satya Sriram. Hello, everyone. I'm 10 years old, studying in grade 5. So, I'm very happy to be part of this DNO Thinker event and very happy to be an alumni and happy to be this event overall to ask you a few questions that are probably the need of the hour today. So, my first would be, why is an iPhone called a secure phone?
Okay. So iPhones are secure because they come with the iOS. That is the operating system for iPhone. That iOS is a closed system. Closed system in the sense people cannot access any applications that you want to develop. On Android phones, it is easier to develop applications on Android phones, whereas you cannot open it, or you cannot access stuff easily on an iOS closed system. So that's why it is said to be very, very secure. And why I'm saying that is the bits and programming that happens within the iOS. None of the source code is available to any common public. It is only kept as a proprietary thing. Proprietary in the sense it is available only within the internals of iPhone or company, being Apple. So they keep it very proprietary. So that is the reason. Whereas in the case of Android phones, what happens is that is available for all people to access because they follow the open source. Open source in the sense it's compatible with, and you can develop a lot of mobile applications and upload it onto your Google Play Store and things like that. Whereas in the case of iPhones, you cannot upload your applications just like that. It goes through a rigorous process of review, and then only you can upload all. If you want to develop a mobile app and then install it and make it available to the public, then that is the kind of restrictions that you might have. And similarly, what happens is the Apple Play Store, lot of tighter implementations are there, and any kind of malicious, anybody cannot snoop inside the iOS system as such. It's technically very difficult. Third point that you need to look at is, I should probably look at it this way. You cannot put any custom ROMs or any external devices onto your iPhones without any kind of sanctions from the Apple iPhone angle. So they control the entire software, the hardware in totality. Whereas in the case of an Android phone, you can add additional resources onto the phone. It is a possibility. But that is not the case, because the device drivers and other such things are very restricted in the case of iPhones. Hope that answers your question.
Okay,
That's a
ma'am.
good
So
one. That's a
thank
good
you
one.
for your answer. So, my second question would be, does an antivirus help increase an Android phone security? This is more a curiosity now, rather
Okay.
than anyone else.
So,
Like any
so
other.
So you know what is a virus, right? So virus is an infection, right? You understand that. So any kind of infection, if it comes to the body, what do? You have to take a vaccine, right? The vaccine is nothing but antivirus. In the software world, we call it antivirus. So instead of giving an injection, we install a program in the mobile or on the computer, so that they constantly monitor the computer or the mobile for any kind of cyber crime or any kind of crime or theft or anything. So anybody cannot snoop in like that. Any kind of virus cannot come inside like that. They keep constantly watching what is happening in your system. Is anybody trying to snoop and grab information from you? All that will be taken care by your antivirus. So there are a lot of antivirus companies. Symantec is one, McAfee is one. There are a lot of tools that are available in the market. So if you want, you can install any one of them, or because a lot of reviews are available, you can pick and choose your own antivirus and then kit and then install it. And they will also periodically keep scanning your equipment or device, and they will also kill the virus. So, but certain virus, like Trojan horse and ransomware, they need a different handling altogether. You must have heard of ransomware from your parents. So ransomware is nothing but some theft happens, so that unless you give them in terms of a money deposit through a bank, through a transaction, the entire data that you have in your computer will not be released onto you or onto your from your mobile. So all such transactions you will have to be careful, and this antivirus definitely helps in the process of barricading yourself from any kind of problems. Does it help?
Okay, ma'am, thank you. So basically, ransomware is like a real life ransom, except they are holding your data and they're asking for a ransom. All
Exactly.
through,
Exactly. So what happens is the antivirus kind of blocks all such things and tries to look at it. So that is what
Okay.
is, yeah.
Yeah, so my last question, which is probably the most important for today, is
Okay.
can someone hack a strong password? Please enlighten us.
It depends on the amount of characters that you have. See, that anyone can hack a password. Again, what we see in normal cases is 5 to 6 characters can be hacked in 10 minutes. 6 to 8 characters can be hacked in half an hour. 8 to 12 characters can be hacked. It is difficult, but it might take some amount of time, say a half a day or so. So your basically your passwords, you have to ensure that they are strong. You should not keep your date of birth. You should not keep things which are very trivial, like your name or the place of birth, or all such things. Those are going to be problematic. So it's preferable to ensure that you set your password a little bit on the complicated side, so that you have few characters like a $sign, a percentage, uppercase and lowercase mixed, and then and it should not be it should be cryptic, in the sense you can keep something like I love to go to Delhi. So if you that can be a password, but you can make it like I stands for the I, L, the starting letter of the love, and then go to G, and then to T, and then Delhi, D. So all that, and then you can add your numerals also along with alpha characters also. So you should be in a position to design your password in such a way that people cannot hack it in normal frequencies. Does it help,
Okay,
ma'am?
ma'am. Yeah, it does, ma'am. Thank you. I should be handing it over to my fellow alumni, Pradyumna.
Thank
Hello,
you.
ma'am. My name is Pradyumnan. I'm studying 8th standard D section. I wanted to ask you that how to identify if my phone or system is hacked or not.
Okay. So you want to know whether your phone or your system is hacked. There are few things that you can look out. Basically, what will happen is if there is a spyware that is being kind of embedded in your mobile phone or your system, your spyware will constantly keep monitoring you, be it the camera or the other resources in the phone or the system. So in that case, what will happen is the processor will start consuming more time for such processing activities. So what will happen is your phone or system will start slowing down considerably. So once you start seeing that, you will know for sure that this is the kind of activity that is happening, and people are somebody is snooping and trying to look at you. So those are few things that you can look out for. And the other thing is, what you need to monitor is in terms of any kind of messages that go. Some calls might go to your friends, but you might not have called those people, or messages might go from your computer onto your friends or as mails, or through Connect. They might be able to send such false messages. They might also try to access your Google account. They might try to access your iCloud account by sending messages across to them, to the administrator, saying that I am so and so, please give me the password, I am unable to reset it, and things like that. Then you will start looking at, oh, this might be a potential issue. Then you should start looking at it. That is one thing. Also, what you should look at is, as far as possible, when you're charging your phones, please do not charge your phones through devices. It's better to do it directly on a wall charger or a plug point directly, because what happens is, if the computer or system that you are trying to use it for charging, essentially if there is already a malware or a virus in it, then that could also start controlling your phones. So you'll have to watch out for such things. So and also phishing messages. Supposing on you have your mail ID, there might be certain mails that might look very deceptive, very deceptive, that it might look close to the website, but it might not be the website that they are trying to ask you to log into, but they might lead you on to subsequent websites. So it might totally start taking your information and control of your computer and system. So we'll have to be careful that ways.
Thank you, ma'am. That was very helpful. Now I will pass it. I pass it over to my friend Advait. It will ask you some questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Pradyumna. Yes.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I'm
Advait.
Advait from Kerala. I'm
Yeah,
15 years old and I'm in class 9.
Yeah, go
Um,
ahead. Go ahead with your
Yes,
question.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I'm very fortunate to be part of this informative session, and I'm proud to be an alumni from the InnoThinker. So I'd like to ask the first question. Ma'am, what is the difference between antivirus and malware?
Okay. So antivirus, as I had told you, basically is nothing but a vaccine that we are trying to have it in a permanent basis on your computer or your system. So the vaccine is nothing but to kill the virus. So the virus is there in the system, or if it comes, it has to identify, scan, and then kill it. So that is the job of the antivirus. So antivirus is a program or a software that is getting installed on your computer or on your phone. Whereas malware is anything that makes the functioning of your system or break down the functioning of your system is a malware. So it could be a virus, it could be a program that is inherently put inside your computer so that it should not function the way it should function. And at the same time, gather some information and feed it back across to other people, other criminals who are trying to tap information from. So that is a malware. So it could be anything, any programming that happens by hackers who kind of work on this on a constant basis. Does it answer your question, Advait?
Yes, ma'am. Now, I would like to ask one more question.
Sure.
Why do I always get messages to accept cookies when I browse internet? Is it good to accept it?
Yeah, cookies can be accepted, but again, you'll have to be watchful. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. It is advantageous to accept cookies because cookies are nothing but files that get dropped onto your computer or your phone once you access a particular website. So what happens is when you access a website, the information gets transmitted across, and the web server what will happen is it will drop that file onto your computer with the preferences that you have logged. Say supposing if I'm accessing the Amazon website. So what will happen is in the cart, whatever you have added to be purchased at a later point in time. Say supposing you're ordering 2-3 books, your sister wants some toys, daddy wants some certain things, mommy wants some grocery stuff. So all that will be parked in the cart. That cart information will be kept in the cookie. So next time you visit, that information will be there. Supposing you're not doing completing the shopping transaction of making the purchase, what will happen is that will still reside as a cookie in your local machine. Now the transmission happens between the local machine to the website through the cookie. So what happens is next time you're going to purchase, this is automatically again made available to you. We can connect to the web server, and this information, the transaction, when we want to make the purchase, we can click I want to buy or purchase, and then the transaction gets completed. So it is not that the web server needs to remember everything. It is kept locally in your machine. It's made available. So like this, a lot of other preference information is made available in your cookie file. Now this cookie file, again, if it is in the wrong hands, it's going to cause a problem. If somebody hacks your machine and they try accessing this cookie information, it's going to be lead to a lot of problems. So you'll have to be careful. That's one. Number two is this cookie information on a particular cake. It can be a currency related information that you want to access, or your language related options. So supposing you're in India, you're accessing Amazon, you need to get the Indian version of Amazon and the rupee value one. But if you are traveling to the US or you're traveling to Singapore, then the version that is for Singapore dollars or Australia, then the Australian dollar related language preferences and the rupee preferences will be saved in the cookie file. So it saves time and effort in terms of retyping the information again. That is avoided. So that is advantageous to that. Preferences can be held in the cookie file. But on the other hand, if you don't delete your cookie file information, as I said, if it goes to other third persons, then it can be misused. So we'll have to watch out on that. And you need to clear the browsing history of the cookie file regularly. Otherwise, you're leaving a trail across for people to sniff and then track you. Does it help, Advait? That was a good question.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, that was very helpful, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I'd like to give it up to my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Sahasra, and I'm 11 years old, and I live in Dublin. I'm going to ask you a question about privacy and cyber security. Give us a tip for safe browsing, and how do you look for trusted, secure websites?
Okay. I think if we can have the slide that I kind of assembled across for the, this one, the previous slide. Yeah. So you're looking at how to kind of browsing and kind of looking at trusted, secure websites. Is that the one, Aishwarya?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically what you have to do is you should prefer to use more of safer tools like do not track safety tools that you can use so that you can set your privacy and your security settings on your browser. On your browser, you have options to set your security and privacy. There is an initial level and an advanced level also. So first you need to set that accordingly. That is one. Second is there are tools that are available in the market like MyRiskTotal, which can look constantly and kind of check and let you know what are the ones that you need to stay away with. Third one was, as I was talking about, any kind of mails that have website links that are sent across to you. It might look like it's your friend's mail ID through which this mail has come to you. If you click on it, it will take you to some distant website, no way close to what you might normally have. I think if we can go over to the slide, slide number 7. Hello?
Yeah, he's scrolling through it. Give us a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Slide 7, is this the one?
Yeah, the phishing one.
Encryption, cookies, phishing. There you go.
Yeah. So the phishing one, if you see, it looks like an Indian Police Service website. In reality, it is not. So people lure you to click that link through a mail or something. Usually the accessing of these websites come as links through your mail. So you should not click every other mail. You should actually type the website name that you wish to go to by physically keying in the website address. That's the best way to avoid these phishing problems. What will happen is in the URL link, wherever there are O's, they will be replaced by 0 or something like that, where you might not notice, but there will be a small change which you might not notice in your hurry to access the website. And it might lead you to some place where you will start having these kind of problems. So you'll have to be careful while looking out for that. Again, can you go back to the the earlier slide that you had parked me in? That was the slide number 4, safe browsing and how to look for trusted, secure websites. Charu, you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So is this a slide that you're looking for?
Just a second. I'm having the PPT on. So it's slide number 4.
Or if you want, you can say the caption of the slide.
Safe browsing and how do I look for trusted, secure websites?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, slide 4.
Yeah. So you look for a privacy, you should always look for a privacy policy of the website. You should also, you should not go by the trust badges. I'll tell you what the trust badges is. And also, please look out for any kind of pop-up messages that come, no? So that you'll have to start looking whether they're redirecting to another spot. So if they redirect to you to another spot, then definitely you'll have to smell something fishy over there. So, and also what you could do is use who is the domain owner. You have to do a little bit of groundwork to really look into if that domain owner is a legitimate one. And similarly, web security tools. These are some things that we can watch out. Can we move to the next slide? Probably then there I can explain it better. Safe browsing. How do I look for trusted, secure websites? Are we there?
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, if you see in this, you are able to see the web security tools, AVG, on the top left hand corner. You see that. So it basically it's a tool that kind of it's like an antivirus tool which keeps monitoring, and then what are the associated, whether your computer is fully protected, any hacker attacks have happened, any privacy related issues have come. So these are tools that are available in the market which we can purchase and install on your computer. That's one. The next, if you go to the right hand corner, you can see a small green lock. Are you able to see that? It says secure. Yeah, exactly. So that spot, if you have to always, whenever you're going to a website, please look out for that lock symbol. If that lock symbol is there, it means that it is a secure website. Okay, that is one of the, and then the next one is the privacy. On the page of the website, you might, on the left hand corner, on the bottom, closer to the status bar, you might see the privacy. Yeah. So you have to read that and try to figure out whether information that is getting collected from us is not being misused. So these are things that you need to start looking into. And I remember I told you about Whois, that is the next right hand side one. Whois will try to allow you to kind of identify whether it is a trusted domain, whether this people have a trusted domain site, because hackers might not, hackers or people who want to kind of take data away from you, those people might not have a registered information or legitimate information. Now the next one is look out for these trusted symbols. Look out for these, like Visa, MasterCard, all this symbol, this image file might be put as display even in a website, but don't just go by the symbol alone. Click on it and see where it takes you. If it takes you to the Visa card related information and then it has to go through appropriately, then you get satisfied. Just seeing them alone is not a guaranteed safe checkout, is not just the image alone. You have to double click and then go back and see whether it is a legitimate one, in terms of supposing if it is supported by PayPal, if it is a Discover card which is backing up their entire transaction. So we'll have to look at that from that perspective.
Thank you for answering all our questions. All your questions and answers were really useful and informative to everyone. I would like to thank InnoThinker and you for giving us a chance to answer questions regarding cybersecurity and privacy.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Thank you. That was I enjoyed the session with the questions that you had all come up.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, before my father told that sometimes in mail people try to do like this poor guy needs money, give him this money, it comes in like spam. Many people try to trick us in mail like that. My father told, ma'am.
Yes. They try to do that. You should not.
I never do, ma'am. My father only wants the mail. I never want the mail. I'm only 10 years old.
once you're 16 years old, create your own mail ID. Until then, don't do it. Actually, a lot of privacy laws are being enforced for the age limit with which children can access. So after you're an adult, you should create your own IDs. Preferably after 16 or after that only you should do that. Because laws, when they are getting promulgated, they would definitely want the parental consent. Without your consent, without your parents' consent, you should not share unnecessary information across onto the web. What happens is a lot of cyber stalking happens, cyber criminal activity will happen. And all these are punishable offenses. So we need to be safe in whatever information that you're sharing across, be it in the net or because you have a lot of information on the net. But you need to judiciously kind of segregate what you need to access and what you need not access. So take the help of your parents to guide you. Don't go into a Google mode always, because a Google mode doesn't help in all times. I would also suggest one thing to you people: if you have the time, please sit and watch a movie called Social Dilemma. It's available in Netflix. Please download that and ask your parents, and you also sit and watch with them, because it kind of gives a very mind-blowing experience in terms of how the information that you share across is kind of manipulated by the social media and how they keep working on you continuously. So whatever clicks that you make, whatever aspects that you touch on the Facebook, how the advertisements come to your Facebook page, and then all that is completely it is like a puppet being controlled. You are controlled by Facebook, you are controlled by Instagram, you are controlled by various. So it depends on the likes that you click, the messages that you put. So the entire profile will be available. So much that we talk about data privacy, we need to be careful in terms of sharing that whatever our likes and dislikes are. So if you want, you have a look at stuff, but don't go too much into commenting, and at the same time maintain your privacy. That's what I keep telling my children. Does that help?
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, what's that movie's name again?
Social Dilemma.
Okay, ma'am. I'll ask my parents if we can see them.
Yes, definitely. You should watch it. It's by Netflix. It's available in Netflix.
Okay, ma'am.
So, with this, we move on to the vote of thanks. Any questions you have, further questions about this or the other post, you can contact us through the WhatsApp numbers flashed in the chat or through the social media. So here goes my vote of thanks. Thank you, Anita Rajesh, for this interactive session. Actually, you made this session a very lively one, and you made us concepts in a very simpler way. It was very easy for us to understand. Thank you for that, and thank you for all the participants in this session and the whole event. Yeah, Anita.
Thank you so much. As much as you guys enjoyed, I enjoyed the entire session with the interactive session by the kids. And I wish them all luck and good luck to you for organizing such a session. And it was very encouraging and very happy to be part of this.
Thank you, Anita. And all this was possible because of all our participants and alumni and parents. They are our support, and they had made this the whole event a very grand one. The new normal celebration really was a very grand one. Thank you all for that. And a special mention to our co-host Niranjana, Harshita, and the interview panel Advait, Pratyuman, Sahasra, and Satrik. You guys were wonderful. Thank you for your support. And organizing committee of InnoThinkers, a big kudos to all of you. You made this event a really good one with your backup work.